Again, our oral microphone is visiting around Marshall County on the Oral History Project, and we're today at 1408 Walnut in Benton, the home of Mrs. Brooks Cross. Ms. Cross, thank you very much for letting me come to see you.
Well, I appreciate you coming, Mr. Mofield.
It's a beautiful home you have here. Nice, wonderful day we've enjoyed, and
We sure have, but then you know this is the home place. This is where we all grew up.
oh, this is Mr. Henry Levitt's
Yes,
home.
it is. This is the home place.
Well, that's
And
fine.
all six of us were raised in this. Every one of us.
Isn't that fine? So it's definitely home to you.
It is
isn't
home. It really is.
Were you born here?
No, I was born in Bardwell, Kentucky, and Daddy was teaching over there at that time. And after I was born, we moved back to Olive Community
Mm-hmm.
for, about 3 or 4 years. 4 years, I guess.
Now,
And-
your dad was one of the Levitts, I guess, that came from out in the Olive area?
Right. He was. His father's name was George Newton, but most people knew him as Uncle Tank.
Mhm.
And his father's name was John. And he was from several, there were several in his family.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the Levitts stayed in North Carolina after coming over to this country.
Oh, that's where they came
Yes.
originally, in North Carolina.
We came to North Carolina. Some records say that we came from Portugal, and some, of course, say that there's no history of Levitts being in Portugal. So it is surmised that there is a lot of Levitts in England, that originally we were in England, and more or less we can trace our ancestors back to 1000 and something in England. But then when the ban was put on of no more immigrants to America from England, a lot of people went to Portugal and then came to the new country from Portugal. And we thought maybe this is what happened to our people too.
Well, that's not too surprising. When we read about the early Pilgrims,
Right.
Puritans, and so on, they first went to Holland, a group of them.
That's right.
Stayed there a while. They got to where they didn't like that area. Their children were growing up speaking Dutch, so they came to America. And
This is-
that happened in a number of areas, of course, including some parts of France, Portugal, maybe Spain. I don't recall any particular incident that's true. Now, your dad's name was
Henry Hardin Lovey, Sr., of course. Now he had I had a brother named Henry Hardin Jr.
I knew him well.
And of course he died.
He was
in
an
60.
attorney.
Right.
Served was county attorney, I believe,
Right.
and of course practiced law. So Henry Hardin is one, and he was a junior. Now I know John Clay. What
Right.
about some of the others?
Well, my older sister, just older than I am, Aline, and she married a Softly, and they live in. She lived in Stanford, Kentucky. He died in 1968, and she continued to stay in Stanford, Kentucky. Then Grace married Pont Nelson, and you know Grace,
The druggist,
the druggist, right?
and
Albert Nelson, but then
everybody called him Pont.
Pont.
In fact, I think he called himself Pont. I've
That's
ridden the
true.
Rotary with him 100 times.
and it was Pont.
Yeah.
Then, of course, Henry and John, and then a younger sister, Jane, and she married Rob Bradley, and they live here in Benton.
I knew the Bradleys.
Clarice was his mother.
Uh-huh.
She was court stenographer, I think, at one time.
I remember one other thing about Pont and Grace. They had some of the most beautiful girls I ever saw.
They had 3 daughters. They really did.
I don't know that I can. I remember one that was cheerleader back in the middle of the time that I was broadcasting ball games. Her name, I don't know what her name was. They called her Punky, though.
Her name's Rosalind. She was a baby. Baby of the family. There's Phyllis and Charlotte. We always called her Skeet. That's the reason I laugh.
Yeah.
And Rosalind, which is better known as Punky.
All right. Having been born in Bartwell, were you there when you started the school?
Oh no, I was still an infant when we came back to Olive Community. The earliest that I can remember about school is going with my older sister to school out at Olive. And of course, I wasn't old enough. But that
you
was
went
when,
along, and they didn't care.
No, they didn't care. They used the school teachers as babysitters, more or less. Anyway, I guess I was about 4 years old. And
You were about 4.
about 4 when I would go to school with Aline. And I don't remember much about it, except she always wanted to go to sleep at school. And I tried to keep her awake. But then coming home from school, I would hide their lunch baskets, and then they'd come and try to find them. That was after school, of course. And we had a lot of fun like that. And that's all I remember about that experience of school. And we walked I guess, a mile or more from the house to school and cut through the back fields. And then another thing I remember about living out on the farm was having the whooping cough out there and grabbing onto the post and whooping over everything. And a great big oak tree we had in the backyard that we really, really enjoyed. And of course, my grandfather didn't live too far from us.
His name was?
George Newton,
Uh-huh.
which was Uncle Tank to most people.
Yeah.
And we would go over there quite often. We
Now,
had a good childhood like that.
great.
Just plain.
Who was your mother?
She was Rudolph. She was Robert Rudolph's daughter. He was normally known as Uncle Bob Rudolph. He was the son of Alex Rudolph, so I understand. Now, Alex served in the Civil War. My grandfather's father.
That
served,
goes back way long.
quite some time. And they thought he had died during service because he didn't come home and he didn't come home. Finally, a year and a half later, he came walking in, and it shocked everybody because he was so long getting back home. Now, there was 12 children of them, and they all lived to be old. Some of them were 99, and of course, Mother's sister was 101, I think. And
There were remarkably long-lived people in those
trying to
days.
stay here. That's right.
Oh, that's
So it's real interesting. Then we moved to Benton when Daddy was elected clerk, county clerk, or circuit clerk or something. We moved to Benton. And that's where I started school over here.
Where did he read law with some lawyer?
Yes,
in the
Uncle
area?
John G. Lovett.
Was an attorney.
Was an attorney.
And of course, the way you became a lawyer then was to kind of they called it reading law, but it was an apprentice system.
That's right. That's
and
true.
of course, they learned the law quite well. I remember reading Alvin Barkley's book about how he did that.
He did the same thing.
Yeah. All the
And
attorneys
that's,
of that generation
That's right, they did.
had done so. So
And,
your dad
was an apprentice to his uncle,
Yeah.
Uncle John. And they were in partners for a long time in law. And yet they'd have cases against each other. That was what was so funny sometimes, too. And,
Well, a fellow named Bill Adams, who works at Murray State in the registrar's office, was telling me yesterday about how funny it was to him. He attended court one time, and Holland Bryan of Paducah had a brother named Dick Bryan,
yes.
who was also an attorney, and they had a nephew named Roy Vance, who's now on the Supreme Court, I believe, of Kentucky, and of course was also an attorney. And the three of them were involved in this, and he said, you never heard people call one another such terrible things as
They
did."
do that. And it's amazing that they ever they're ever friends again, but they do. They go out and have lunch together and just as bigger friends as ever before.
To them,
It's
it's
quite fun.
professional.
And right, that's all.
They're representing their
That's
clients.
true. That's the only thing.
That would have been a humorous situation. Well, do you remember when you started the school?
I was 5 years old. I would have been 6 in March.
Mm-hmm.
That was a long time ago. Don't ask me how many years.
Well,
That's all right.
was here in Benton.
Here in Benton. And the schoolhouse, of course, was quite different from what it is now.
Was it about the same place?
Yes, it was at the same, no. Well, the main building was up on the hill. And that's the only one we had. And there's extended areas on each side.
Mm-hmm.
And the first grade would meet downstairs on the right toward town, and the second grade would meet downstairs on the left. And then when you would progress in grades, well, you'd go upstairs after the second grade.
It made the big ones climb.
Oh, yes.
then, and the little ones stayed.
That's true.
Well, I can
And that's
recall at Hardin it was, it was
Similar.
that way.
That's
they had
true.
the first 4 grades downstairs, and the 8th grade was upstairs.
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, I think, were upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I played basketball, but never on an indoor court.
Always outdoors.
We played outdoors. Well, I'll take that back because we did play down at Tobacco Warehouse when they had the tobacco barn down there,
Mm-hmm.
and they quit using it, and we did get that to have our basketball games in. And it was cold. We didn't have many people to go. So that's the only time that we had a floor to play on. We played outside up until our senior year, I guess.
Do you remember any of the teachers you had?
Oh, yes, Miss Nanny Eads taught in the 2nd grade. I remember her, 2nd and 3rd.
I don't believe I've heard that name before.
Well, I loved her. She was just real sweet. She married and moved to Greenville, Kentucky. And I have seen her 2, 3, 4 times since I've been older. But I think she has died since then. And then Ruth Saunders was one that taught us. Have you heard her name?
Not frequently. If I have, I don't
And
recall.
Karen Holland Salmon, Bernard Holland's wife.
For
taught
some
us.
reason, most of the people that I've interviewed, it seems, went to one-room country schools.
And May Coleman, you haven't heard of her either, I guess.
No, I don't think so.
Well, May Coleman was our teacher. Hilda Height was our teacher
Now, I've heard that name, I believe.
at one time. And Helen Peel was our teacher at one time. In high school, Clyde Fieldback. And Miss Addie Fawn.
Well, now, I knew her.
You knew her, didn't you?
Yeah.
And
Clyde Philbeck. Now, it seems to me that I remember him. Was he out of Hardin in that area?
he was out around the Olive District.
Olive District, yeah.
Out there. And he was a good teacher. He taught Latin. He was hard. Our Latin was one.
Latin teachers seem to be hard.
Just hard, anyway. Then we had one by the name of Miss Stevens. She was from Wisconsin, I believe. Was here one year. And Miss Tinsley. And
Now, how do you...
Mr. Morgan, Hatley Morgan's father, I mean.
I recall having read somewhere, or maybe Hatler told me once, that they moved here from West Tennessee
Right.
so his dad could take a job as teaching in the school system.
And L.D. Williams from Murray. Did you ever know L.D. Williams?
Yes, yes.
He taught here. And of course, I believe, I don't know whether Tellis Chambers was here when we, yes, he was. Tellis Chambers was.
Now, Benton was always, I suppose, a little bit more extensive than the one-room country schools, and you mentioned the fact that they taught Latin, so
Right.
the curriculum was a little broader than.
That's right. And we had Caesar. Mary Compton taught Caesar. She married. I can't think.
Well, that's
I forgot.
that's
I
fine.
just can't think.
Now,
But-
you married whom?
Jim Ed Cross. He's the son of Edward Franklin Cross, and he was raised out around Old Maple Springs, out in that area, or rather, he was born out there, and then they moved to Benton and was raised here in Benton.
I assume, was he some sort of relative to Joe Cross Creason?
Oh, Joe Cross was his own nephew.
Well, I figured
his-
there
he
might
was
be
his-
some connection there.
Joe
I remember
Cross
a man named Dalton Cross, I believe was his name.
Yes, now he was a half brother of Pap. It's what we call Jim Ed's father.
Now, how did you meet him?
Oh, well, he just lived up the street. So that wasn't hard to do.
Proximity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone said once that had something to do with love, because if you never met them, you
Sure.
couldn't very well fall in
Sure,
love with
that's
them.
so true.
But anyway, you didn't meet on the ocean liner
Oh,
crossing
no,
the
we
Atlantic.
didn't have anything that romantic or anything like that.
Okay.
It was just a small town, and so we met here.
Now, what was his occupation? Did you?
Well, he worked at first. He didn't finish high school, but he went to work at the post office. Then he went to work at the Bank of Marshall County, and then after that he went to work as engineer on the state highway.
Mhm.
And he was working as a highway engineer when he died in 1949.
Well, he's been dead a considerable amount
Right.
of time. Hasn't he? Now, did you have any children?
We had 3, 2 girls and a boy. And they don't live around, they don't live here in Benton. I have one daughter in Murray.
Well, that's
Shirley
not very
Boone.
far.
That's right. Shirley Boone in Murray. Jimmy Cross
Is that
in...
part of the dry cleaning empire?
Right, that's part of Jimmy.
Okay.
It's her husband. And then the next one was a boy, and he's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he's assistant director to Power in TVA in Chattanooga. And then the youngest is a daughter, and her name is Jane. And believe it or not, each one of them have 3 children.
So you have, let's see, 9.
9 children, right? Grandchildren.
Grandchildren.
Right.
Some of them you don't get to see every day.
No,
of
I
course.
certainly don't. I don't.
The ones in Murray would be.
Well,
nearby,
they're
but-
all scattered, so I don't see my grandchildren, but I see Shirley quite often.
There aren't any great grandchildren. are there?
One, just a little one,
Uh-huh.
just a little dot. I never have seen that one. He's
Oh,
too
well.
little.
We'll have to arrange for something there.
I know. Now I told Jimmy I must see him before he grows up to be grown, and he walk around and say, "My, who is that old woman?"
Well, tell us. We've got about 10 minutes left or so. Let's talk about what things were like around Benton when you first remember it.
Okay, there was no sidewalks out front. And there was no sidewalks in North Benton. There was a big ditch all the way down Main Street.
Now,
On the side.
someone mentioned that before. I believe might have been Raleigh James Jackson, but someone told me
Right.
about a big ditch.
There was bridges across that ditch to get to the houses over on the other side.
Mhm.
And one of the favorite pastime was going to the railroad stations to see the train pass.
That was about all there was to do
a
in
big
Hardin.
thing to do. It was. And of course, the courthouse and the churches. We did have a theater of sort, and Mr. Mathis ran it.
Mhm.
And it was over on the corner where Olive and 13th Street.
Mhm.
But of course, it just ran on weekends. I mean, on Friday and Saturday, maybe we didn't have it every night
Mhm.
by any means. And of course, no Sunday movies at all. We could not dance. I mean, there's no dancing. You could have parties in your home. There's no means of of recreation at all.
One lady told me once, she said, we had play parties. Said a play party was a square dance by another name.
That's so true. But I couldn't go to those unless we went to a party and they were playing by having a square dance.
Yeah.
But we made our own fun. Around the house and things like that. We just had a good time. We did not have the toys and the things to do with that the people have now. We did
But
not.
you still had the same enjoyment.
We did. Certainly did. Maybe more so.
Fewer toys, and that left a little more to your ingenuity and
More
imagination.
creativity
Uh-huh.
on our part to enjoy
Mhm.
what we had.
Dolls were far less complex.
Right. Right. We were happy if we had a doll.
Yeah.
We really were. And to this very day, I don't smell an orange but when I think of Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only time we had them.
The only time.
Oranges meant Christmas, and so that was good.
I remember that quite well,
Mhm.
having grown up in the Depression years
Right.
of the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't change till after World War II.
No, I know it didn't. And now they have an abundance of things that no one thing stands out as Christmas in their mind. But I remember one thing. The officers took T-Mel Ford in on a whiskey raid one
Mhm.
time. And so it was auctioned off at the courthouse square, up at the courthouse. And Daddy bought it for $15.
A Model, a Model T Ford for $15.
Right.
Well,
Anyway, this was when I was in high school. So none of the rest of the family would drive it except Dad and me. So we drove the car. But one time,
you knew how to drive a Model T then.
I did. But one 4th of July, the girls, all of our friends were out here. My friends were out here. And we wanted to go riding. We asked Dad if we could have the car if Margaret would drive it. She could drive because she'd been driving with her daddy. And he said yes. Well, after we got started, Margaret decided, she said, I can't drive. She says, if my daddy sees me, he will kill me. I can't drive. I said, well, get over, I'll drive. I had never touched the wheel before in my life.
And
So anyhow, I got under there, and she was telling me what to do, so I drove it. We passed Aunt Della's, and Mother was sitting on the porch, and she all but had a heart attack right there. That was the beginning of my driving. And
you did all right. Didn't have
yes,
a
I
wreck.
didn't have a wreck. So after that, well, we went to ball games in it. And as long as we had some boy to go with us, Mother would let us take the T model and go to the ball games. So we had a lot of fun. With a $15 T model.
Oh, that is precious story. I can't imagine buying a car now, even a junker, for $15.
$15. But
Of course,
that's
that
what it was.
15 was a lot.
That was a lot of money for
More
us.
than-
I get.
I suppose it would be at least 100 now.
Sometimes we couldn't start that car, and we'd have to crank.
Mhm.
So one day we were going to the ball game down at Calvert City. We got out there and we cranked and we cranked and we cranked, and we couldn't start it.
Did you ever jack up a wheel?
No, but I've changed tires. But then Weldon tried to start it. He was the boy that was going with us. He couldn't start it. But finally we gave up, and come to find out, Daddy had turned the gas off. It just had a little knob up there to turn it off with.
Little petcock, and you turned that off.
And so it wouldn't leak any gas. So that was the reason we couldn't start the car.
And you wore yourself out.
Yes, and didn't get to go to the ball game. That's a big thing. We couldn't do that. I'm sorry I've talked so much on this. I didn't mean to.
Oh, that's wonderful. Those are great stories. We've got time for about another one here, 2 more minutes. So, you know.
Everything happened to me, though, that happened in the family, everything. You know, all of them, funny things. Well, of course, you know, when I was growing up, I couldn't talk distinctly at all.
Wasn't aware of that.
You weren't?
No.
Well, I couldn't. I couldn't speak distinctly. Everybody made fun of me.
So they teased you.
They teased me. And the teachers would have me get up in front of the class and talk. And everybody would say, oh, talk, talk, talk. You know. Well, I hesitate to say that I used to not be able to speak distinctly, because I'm always thinking, well, who says you can now? I don't know.
You
But,
sound very clear to me.
Well,
So that's an interesting story.
that's,
You just
well,
cured yourself.
well, not necessarily. Mother and Daddy had me to a Byron King that used to come here to give lectures. They were worried, afraid I was going to talk like that.
Did he do you like Demosthenes did, put stones in your, pebbles in your mouth?
No, but he said that when I got all my teeth, I would talk.
And
Then
you did.
I did. And then I worried if I lost my teeth, if I couldn't talk, then I still have them.
That's another wonderful story. Well, I wish we could go on forever,
Oh, there's
but you know, 30 minutes goes so rapidly.
there's a lot of things that happened in a family of 6, but it seemed that all the things they laugh about is about the things I did.
Always happened to you. Well, thank you very much, Brooks,
Okay.
Lovett, Cross, and we appreciate your inviting us and letting us come. I'm Ray Mofield. This is the Oral History Broadcast, and we've been visiting at 1408 Walnut in Benton. We return you now to our studio.